So I walked in the front door with from the laundromat with my bag of clean laundry, and when I looked at Jane, before we said anything, I think we both knew that we were about to address the elephant in the room, that our 2-year relationship had run its course, and we both knew it. So we go over to the sad couch, and we have the conversation that all relationships end with, like the long business-like conversation. And it was late January, and Jane and I were 20 years old, and we were already totally buried by our 3rd-year course load at school. And we were kind of like, well, there's just 3 months left of school, and we live in this nice 2-bedroom apartment. Like, we could try and find a new place, but we're grown-ups. Let's make this work. So Jane says, but we have to promise that no matter what, for the next 3 months, while we live together, we can't pursue any new relationships. And I say, Jane, of course, I never would. So Jane was the first love of my life. And 1 week later, I meet Sarah, the second love of my life. I was cast in a play as an elderly, blind, Polish-Jewish basket weaver in a play called Crackpot. And they called me in for a makeup trial. And they're like, Sam, this is Sarah. She's going to be your dresser. And they left me alone in the room with Sarah, and I'd never seen her before. And all of a sudden, she's sitting down in front of me, and she has her hand on my knee, and she's in my face, putting on liquid eyeliner. And I remember being frustrated with how attractive she was. I'm like, who is this bombshell blowing on my face right now? And you know, you just meet some people in this life where from the second you meet them, you're like, well, this is going to happen, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. It's like you have a boyfriend who you're happy with, and I live with my ex-girlfriend. I guess we're about to ruin everything. So the first time that I kiss Sarah is at a theater party, and it's like a bumping party. And of all the people that could have walked in, who sees our first kiss but Jane? And Jane runs out crying. I go after her, and I can't find her. And I go home, and Jane doesn't come home that night or the next night. And she comes home on the 3rd day, and she says, I found a place that I'm going to move to. Like, this was naive to think that we could make this work. So that week I helped Jane pack all of her things, and I helped her load the U-Haul, and she drives to this place that she's going to move into on the Sunday. And when she arrives at this bungalow, there's like a dozen crying middle-aged people, and they're like, our mom, who owns the house, just died last night, so you have to find another place to live. And Jane comes back, and she's crying, and she's like, I have nowhere to go. And I'm like, I'm seeing Jane, and knowing that I fucking did this to her, I just feel like the biggest asshole in the world. I'm like, okay, Jane, I'm gonna end the thing with Sarah, and we're gonna move in here, and it's gonna be okay. And when I said that, I really meant it. But I can't, like, I've quit. I used to smoke a pack a day. I had a gambling problem, and I quit those things, and I'm okay. But when I was 20 years old, I could not quit Sarah. I was a crazy person for Sarah. And Jane and I I was still with Sarah, and Jane and I were together, and it was awful and awkward all the time. And sometimes it would be funny, and we'd have a good laugh, but then it'd be awful again immediately. And and we got through the last 2 months, and then Jane moves to Calgary for the summer. I moved to the Okanagan for the summer, and I have Sarah now, and I'm so happy. We weathered the storm, and nothing but hope. We did it, Sarah. 1 week later, Sarah breaks up with me. And I'm so devastated that I do what all white heterosexual sad men in their 20 years old do. I write a thinly veiled autobiographical romantic comedy about having my heart broken, and I call it God, the Universe, and Annie Hall. Of course I did. And that summer I don't talk to Sarah, but I talk to Jane all the time, and we're working on our friendship, and several months pass, and I'm writing new drafts of the show, and I book a show slot in October, and when we go back to school, I'm like, Jane, I need a director, and there's only one person that I think could handle, that I trust to direct my show, and it's you. And Jane says, no. I'm like, please. She's like, no. I'm like, Jane. And she's like, I will direct your show if you promise to not get back together with Sarah. I'm like, Jane. That's impossible. So I start secretly seeing Sarah because I'm a lost child. I'm the worst 20-year-old ever. And so one day, I send Jane my script, and she reads it. And we go out to Denny's, and we're sitting in Denny's, and Jane's like, we're catching up, and she says, I actually started seeing a guy this summer, and it got pretty serious, and he's actually coming up from Seattle to visit this weekend. I'm like, you met a guy? Jane, that's fantastic, because this is actually pretty funny. I've been secretly back with Sarah, and she's like, oh, then I'm not directing your play. I'm like, what? But you're seeing a guy. She's like, no, I had one stipulation. So then Jane goes home that night and writes the meanest email ever. And one of the closing line in all caps was, if you're gonna write a one-man show, write one. But don't act like your two-person show is about anyone but yourself, you asshole. And I found that email on my old Hotmail account this week when I was preparing for this. I was like so proud of young Jane in that moment. So anyway, I somehow, like by this point, we've already hung posters and put out the Facebook event with both of our names on it. And I'm like, Jane, if you drop out of it now, then it's gonna we're gonna have to explain it to everyone. It's gonna be the worst. Like, let's just do this stupid play. Let's stay in this crappy play. So having Jane direct it was actually the best thing ever, because Jane did not give a shit about my feelings, and she was really mean and blunt with what was wrong about my show. She's like, you call this a female character? This is a manic pixie dream girl. It's very indicative of how you treat women, you asshole. And that, all jokes aside, that's a pretty, I feel like we should yell that at all 20-year-old men before we go forward. So Jane and I make this play, and it actually came out okay. It was about a guy who worked in a video store, and he built a religion for himself based on his favorite Hollywood movies. It's like guy meets girl, and like an example of one of the scenes from it, a little sneak peek of it, is he's like, so what's your name anyway? And she's like, oh, I'm embarrassed by what my name is. He's like, try me. And she's like, it's Destin. And he's like, your name's Destin? As in destiny? Which is why 20-year-olds shouldn't be allowed to name characters. So, those people in this room that have put your words and work out there in the world know how delicate those like early experiences are. And I I really believe that if I had anyone that wasn't Jane directing it, it would have been a negative experience because it was really shitty before Jane got her hands on it. And I was really happy that Jane ended up getting lots of opportunities as a designer and a director, and people liked her work in the show. And several years later, I dated Sarah for 3 years, and yeah, I'm not going to say anything bad about Sarah. Jane, to this day, is my best friend in the world. I call her just about every day. I call her whenever anything is good or bad in my life, and she does the same for me, and we are each other's family. And we haven't collaborated on anything for 8 years until this past month we started recording the first couple episodes of our podcast that we're making together about dating and relationships, and we're calling it I Hope We Can Still Be Friends. Thank you.